My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a junior architect at a mid-sized firm downtown. I wake up at 6 every morning, I make 1 cup of coffee, and I commute 40 minutes on the train while everyone else sleeps against the windows. I am, by most definitions, a functioning adult. But last April, on my 31st birthday, I stood on the platform in my good coat, the camel one I saved for 3 months to buy, and I held my phone in both hands, watching the screen. Waiting. The way you wait when you already know something isn't coming, but you can't quite make yourself stop looking. No call. No text. Not even a 2-word notification from my mother. And here is the part one need you to understand before we go any further. This wasn't the first time. It was just the last time. This is the story of how I spent years being invisible inside my own family, and how, on the morning of my 31st birthday, I decided to give myself the only gift that had ever mattered. I had been waiting my whole life to be chosen. I just hadn't realized I was the only one who could choose me. Part 2: The family, I grew up explaining. Let me tell you about my family. There are 4 of us. My mother, Diane, my older brother, Marcus, my younger sister, Becca, and me, Claire, the middle child, which in our house meant something very specific. It meant invisible in plain sight. My mother is charming. I want to say that honestly because it matters. Diane is the kind of woman who remembered every neighbor's birthday, who brought soup to sick coworkers, who volunteered every December at the church food drive with a smile that people talked about for weeks. She was warm to everyone, just not particularly warm to me. Marcus was the eldest, which in my mother's world made him precious. He was the one who got the car at 16, the tuition paid in full, the phone calls on Sunday where Diane would laugh and say, "That boy, honestly." And Becca was the youngest, which made her delicate. Becca got protected. Becca got the gentle voice and the extra helping and the excuses made on her behalf. And then there was me, Claire, who was so capable. Claire, who always figured things out. Claire, who was handed independence like it was a compliment when really it was just neglect with better PR. Looking back, I can trace the exact shape of my invisibility. It wasn't that my mother was cruel. She wasn't. It was quieter than that. It was the absence. The not noticing. The way a person can look directly at you and somehow not see you at all. I paid for my own school supplies by 14 because Diane said I seemed fine handling things. I worked part-time through high school while Marcus got an allowance. I put myself through a state university while my mother co-signed Marcus's loan for a school 3 times the cost. Every time I mentioned any of this, the answer was the same. Mom said, waving her hand like she was clearing smoke from the air, "Claire, you're the strong one. You don't need us the way they do. You never have." And I would nod. Because what do you say to that? How do you explain that being called strong feels like being told you're not allowed to need anything? I stayed because she was my mother. Because every year, I thought maybe this year would be different. Because hope is the thing that keeps you in situations long after your common sense has packed its bags. Part 3: The year the slights became a pattern. Every family has a language. My family's language was comparison, and I was always the unflattering example. It started small, the way these things always do. When I got promoted at 26, the youngest junior architect the firm had hired in a decade, I called my mother first. I remember sitting in the parking garage after my boss told me, my heart still racing, dialing her number with shaking hands. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," she said. And then, without a breath, "Did I tell you Marcus is thinking about starting his own company?" I told him I'd help him with the startup costs. He has such good ideas. I sat in that parking garage for a long time after I hung up, just sitting. At 27, I had a minor surgery. Outpatient, nothing dramatic, but I was alone in the recovery room, and I was scared the way you're scared when you're alone in a medical setting and you've been alone your whole life and you really just want someone to show up. I had told my mother 2 weeks in advance. She had said she'd try to come. She didn't come. She texted at 7 that evening. "Hope you're feeling better. Becca had a rough day. Had to be there for her. You understand." I understood. I always understood. That was the problem. At 28, I organized the entire family Christmas. The planning, the grocery shopping, the table settings, the coordination with relatives I barely knew. I worked on it for 6 weeks. On Christmas morning, Diane hugged Marcus at the door and said, "Marcus, this whole thing was his idea, wasn't it? He always brings us together." She looked at me across the room while she said it. Not to correct herself, just to acknowledge me with a small nod, like I was the help. At 29, I found out that my mother had lent Marcus $12,000 a second time, without telling me. I only found out because he mentioned it casually, the way people mention things they don't think you'll care about. When I asked my mother about it, she said something that I have turned over in my mind 1,000 times since. "Claire," she said slowly, like she was explaining something to someone who was being deliberately obtuse, "Marcus needs a safety net. You've never needed one. You're different." "Different how, Mom?" "You just handle things." Handle things. I was 29 years old, and I had been handling things since I was 14, and somewhere in there my mother had decided that made me less of a daughter and more of a competent stranger she shared a bloodline with. Part 4, me 30th birthday, and the thing she said. Let me tell you about my 30th birthday, because that was the dress rehearsal for what happened the following year. I had told my mother about my birthday dinner 2 months early. A small restaurant downtown, nice but not expensive. I'd reserved a table for 6, me, my 2 closest friends, my mother, Marcus, and Becca. I sent a calendar invite. I confirmed twice. On the day of, Marcus canceled at noon. Something came up at work. Becca canceled at 4. Not feeling great. My mother called me at 6, 45 minutes before our reservation, and I could hear a television in the background. "I'm so tired, Claire Bear," she said. She only used that nickname when she wanted something forgiven preemptively. "I was going to come, but your brother needed me to help him look at some paperwork tonight, and I said I would, and then the evening just got away from me. You're not upset, are you? You know you can reschedule." I stood in my apartment, in the dress I had bought specifically for that dinner. I had done my hair. I had made a reservation months ago. "Sure, Mom," I said. "No problem. No problem. No problem. No problem." That was my whole relationship with my mother compressed into 2 words. Every hurt swallowed with a smile because I was the capable one, the strong one, the one who handled things. I went to dinner alone. I sat at a table for 2 at the bar, and I ate pasta and drank a glass of wine, and I told the bartender it was my birthday when she asked why I looked like I was thinking too hard. She brought me a small chocolate thing with a candle in it and sang happy birthday in a quiet, kind voice, and I held it together until I got outside, and then I cried on the street for exactly 2 minutes before I told myself to stop. 30 years old, standing on a sidewalk, crying over a mother who chose paperwork. That was when I first thought it. What am I actually waiting for? Part 5, the year I stopped being available. After my 30th birthday, something shifted in me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no single morning where I woke up transformed. It was more like a slow, quiet settling, the way a house settles into its foundation after years of small adjustments. I stopped waiting. And when I stopped waiting, I started noticing what had been there all along. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Osei. She had a small office with a plant that was always slightly too big for its pot, and she had this habit of waiting a full beat before she responded to anything I said, as though she wanted to be sure she'd heard me completely. No one in my family had ever done that. In our second session, I described my family the way I always had, carefully with footnotes, making sure to mention my mother's good qualities, apologizing for the parts that sounded bad. Dr. Osei looked at me and said simply, "Why are you defending her to me?" I didn't have an answer. That question stayed with me for weeks. Why did I always lead with her defense? Why did I make myself smaller to make her look better? What exactly was I protecting? Over the following months, I started doing something I had never done before. I started declining. Marcus called asking me to help him move, the 3rd time in 4 years, and I said I had plans. My mother asked me to come home for a random weekend to help with the yard, and I said I couldn't. Becca wanted me to draft a letter to her landlord because she wasn't good with words, and I said she should try first. The reactions were illuminating. Marcus called me twice more to guilt me into helping. My mother said, "I don't know what's gotten into you. Becca actually managed to write the letter herself, and it was fine. What I discovered in that year of quiet declining was this. I hadn't been needed because I was the capable one. I had been used because I had never said no. There's a difference, and it matters. I started building my real life with real intention. I made friends who remembered my birthday without prompting. I started going to a weekend pottery class where no one knew my family or my history, and I was just Claire who always centers her clay off to one side. I booked a solo trip to Portugal for the fall. I saved money with a clarity I hadn't had before because I wasn't emotionally spending my energy managing everyone else's feelings. I was happy. Quietly, genuinely, surprisingly happy. And I realized that the happiness had been waiting for me the entire time, just on the other side of my own availability. Part 6. The morning of my 31st birthday. My 31st birthday fell on a Thursday. A regular work Thursday, gray April sky, the kind of morning where the city smells like rain that hasn't come yet. I woke up and I lay in bed for a moment and I thought, today is my birthday. I said it out loud to my ceiling. Today is my birthday. And then I got up and made coffee. By 7:15, I had checked my phone. My two closest friends had already texted, Priya at 6:51, Jess at 7:03. My coworker Daniel had sent a voice message singing happy birthday slightly off-key. My grandmother on my father's side had sent a card by post. It had arrived the day before, which I found quietly moving, that she had planned ahead. From my mother, nothing. From Marcus, nothing. From Becca, nothing. I noticed the absence the way you notice a missing tooth with your tongue, automatically, without wanting to. But here's what was different this time. I didn't spiral. I didn't call. I didn't refresh. I didn't perform the usual ritual of making excuses for them in my own mind. I just noticed. And then I put my phone in my bag, and I left for work. My commute takes me past a small florist on the corner of Millbrook and Fifth. It's run by an older woman named Helen who always has something beautiful in the window and who once gave me a free stem of eucalyptus because she said I looked like I needed greenery. I had never bought myself flowers before. Not for my own birthday. It had always seemed either sad or self-indulgent, and I was never sure which, so I just never done it. That morning I stopped. I went in, and I looked around for a few minutes, and Helen came out from the back with her reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she said, "What's the occasion?" And I said, "It's my birthday." And she said, "Well then you need something spectacular." I bought a bouquet of deep orange ranunculus and white freesias, and one stem of pale pink peonies. It cost $22, which I know because I remember thinking, $22 is the least anyone has ever spent on my birthday, and it is already the most intentional gift I've ever received. I carried those flowers to work on the train. I held them in my lap, and the woman across from me smiled and said, "Birthday?" And I said yes, and she said, "Happy birthday, hon," with such warmth that I felt something unlock very quietly in my chest. Part 7. What my mother said when she finally called. My mother called at 4:17 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I was in the middle of reviewing a site plan, and my phone lit up on my desk, and I looked at it for a full 3 seconds before I answered. "Claire, happy birthday, sweetheart." She said it with the same brightness she used for everything, that smooth, practiced warmth. I was going to call this morning, but it's been such a day. You know how it is. "Hi, Mom. Did you do anything fun? Are you going out tonight?" "I'm having dinner with Priya and Jess," I said. "Oh, lovely. Those girls are so good to you." A pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You know, Marcus is in town this week. You should come by. We could all have dinner Saturday." I looked at the ranunculus in the glass on my desk. Still bright. Still exactly what I had chosen for myself that morning. "I can't Saturday, Mom. I have plans." "Oh, what plans?" "Just plans." A beat of silence. She wasn't used to that answer from me. I had always over-explained, always filled the silence with apology. Not this time. "Is everything all right, Claire?" "Everything's fine," I said. And then I said something I had never said before in 31 years. "Mom, I have to get back to work. Thank you for calling." And I ended the call. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I had imagined this moment in 100 different ways over the years. The moment I finally didn't perform contentment, and I had always imagined myself shaking, or crying, or full of the kind of righteous anger that burns hot. But I wasn't angry. I was just clear. Clear the way a room feels after you've opened all the windows for the first time in years. Part 8: The dinner, and the conversation that followed. Priya and Jess took me to a restaurant I had been wanting to try for months, a small Basque place in the neighborhood that had a waiting list, and they had somehow gotten us a table. Priya had arranged a card that she'd had everyone in our friend group sign. Jess had made a playlist on her phone called Claire's 31 and played it from a small Bluetooth speaker she'd brought in her bag, turning it down whenever the waiter came over. We ate small plates and drank something cold and Spanish, and Priya asked me how I was doing, not the social version of that question, but the real version, the one she asked with her eyes steady and her fork down. I told them about the flowers, about the woman on the train, about ending the call with my mother. How did it feel? Jess asked. Like putting down something I didn't realize I was still carrying, I said. Priya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Good, she said simply. Good. That dinner was the happiest birthday I can remember. Not because anything extraordinary happened, because I was entirely present for it. I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't managing the emotional temperature of people who didn't particularly care about mine. I was just there at a table with two women who had shown up, punctually with a playlist and a card, because that's what people who love you do. They show up. 2 weeks later, my mother called again. Then Marcus. Then, eventually Becca, though Becca's call was more confused than anything else. She'd apparently noticed something had changed, but wasn't sure what. My mother's second call was longer. She had clearly had time to think, which for Disowned meant time to reframe. I feel like we haven't connected lately, she said. You seem distant. I've had a lot going on, Mom. I just want you to know that you can always talk to me. I know sometimes I get caught up with your brother and Becca. I know, I said. But you've always been so self-sufficient. I suppose I assumed you were fine. I took a breath. I had practiced this with Dr. Osei, not rehearsed, exactly, but thought through. Mom, being self-sufficient doesn't mean I don't need to be seen. It just means I learned early how to get by without it. Silence. I don't know what you mean by that, she said quietly. I know, I said. I'm not sure there's more I can explain right now. But I'd like things to be different between us. I'm just not willing to keep pretending there's something they're not. She didn't have an answer for that. But she didn't hang up, either. We talked for another 10 minutes about small things, the garden, a TV show she'd been watching, and when we said goodbye it was careful and a little tender, the way a conversation is when both people know something real has been said, and neither one is quite ready to process it yet. I don't know what my mother took from that call. I know what I took. The knowledge that I had finally told the truth, quietly and without cruelty, and the world had not ended. Part 9: What justice looks like when it's quiet. I want to tell you what happened to my family after that because I know you're waiting for the big confrontation, the dramatic scene, the moment where everything unravels. I want to be honest with you. That's not exactly how it went. Life, when you're paying attention to it, is rarely that cinematic. My mother and I are in what I would call a careful rebuilding. Cautious. She has called on my birthday every year since, on the day, not 4 hours later. Last year she asked what I wanted to do to celebrate, and when I said I might come visit that weekend, she had my favorite meal ready when I arrived. Was it everything I'd ever wanted? No. Was it different? Yes. And different, when you've spent years in the same stuck pattern, can feel like a miracle. Marcus and I have a cordial relationship. I stopped being available to move boxes or troubleshoot his life, and without my availability to rely on, he found other solutions. Some of them were better than anything I would have arranged for him. He is more capable than my mother ever let him believe, which is its own kind of injustice she did him. Becca actually surprised me. Once I stopped playing the family workhorse, she found her footing in a way I hadn't expected. She got a job she loves and a therapist of her own, and we have lunch every month or so, just the two of us, and she once said to me, I didn't realize you carried so much. I thought you were just naturally fine. I told her I wasn't. She said, me neither. We laughed, and it was the most honest moment we'd ever had. The justice, I've come to understand, wasn't in any confrontation. It was in this: I stopped making myself small to fit inside a story someone else had written for me. That's the revenge, if you want to call it that. Not their downfall. My uprising. Dr. Osei asked me once what I would have said to my younger self, 14-year-old Claire, buying her own school supplies while her brother got an allowance, already being told she was strong, already learning to handle things. I thought about it for a long time. I would have told her that needing things isn't a weakness. I finally said that being capable doesn't mean you don't deserve care. That strength isn't the same as not hurting. Part 10: The Gift in the End. Now, when April comes around, I stop at Helen's florist every year on my birthday morning. It's become a ritual, the truest kind of ritual, the kind that means something because you chose it, not because someone told you to. Helen always has something waiting. Last year it was dark burgundy tulips and eucalyptus. The year before, pale yellow roses that she said matched the season exactly. This past April, she came out from the back before I'd even touched anything and said, "I was wondering when you'd be in. Birthday?" And I said yes, and she said, 32? And I said 33, and she said, "You look younger every year." That's what happens when you start taking care of yourself. I don't know if she knows how much that lands. I think she might. I carry those flowers to work on the train. I still get smiles from strangers. I still feel the same thing I felt the first time, that quiet unlocking, that warmth of a small kindness that means something because it's entirely real. And here is what I want to say to anyone who is sitting somewhere right now, watching their phone, waiting for the people who are supposed to love you first to remember who you are. You can wait. I know what waiting feels like, the hope that is also, if you look at it honestly, a kind of self-abandonment. Or you can stop at the florist. You can buy the flowers yourself. You can get on the train and hold them in your lap and accept the smile from a stranger and let it count. You can call the friends who always call back. You can eat the good food. You can build the life that wasn't given to you. The gift I picked up on the way to work on my 31st birthday cost $22 and smelled like spring, and I chose every single stem myself. It was, without question, the best birthday present I have ever received. My name is Claire. I am 33 years old. And I am, at long last, entirely fine.